when a typhoon pounded the ocean in early December 1943. Under the surface, submarine USS Sailfish operated under strict orders from Ultra. According to intelligence, somewhere ahead, a Japanese convoy, including an escort carrier, a cruiser, and 2 destroyers, pressed through the weather to get to their destination. The radar flickered at 9,000 yards, but the crew couldn't see a thing through the midnight storm. Everything depended on their instruments. Bill Dillon, the radar operator, focused on the blips. The enemy was close. Sailfish moved into position, her crew waiting in silence until she locked on to Chuyo, landing 2 solid hits on the escort carrier. The ship, now struggling, was lagging behind the convoy. But Captain Ward wasn't done. He was determined to press the attack until his enemy slipped beneath the waves. Unbeknownst to the crew, this victory carried an eerie reminder of Sailfish's earlier days, when she was known by a completely different name. On March 1st, 1939, merely 6 months before the invasion of Poland that sparked World War II, USS Squalus, America's latest Sargo-class submarine, was commissioned into the Navy. Named after a type of shark, Squalus had a length of 310 feet and a displacement of 1,450 tons when serviced. Her power, brought by 2 diesel-electric engines, gave her a surface speed of around 21 knots and a submerged speed of up to 8 knots, allowing her to dive to depths of over 250 feet, making her perfect for the deep-sea operations rising in oceans all over the world. As a Sargo-class submarine, Squalus represented the U.S. Navy's ongoing efforts to enhance underwater capabilities in the late 1930s, featuring several advancements in submarine design over earlier classes. For armament, she was equipped with 8 21-inch torpedo tubes, 4 at the bow and the other 4 at the stern, capable of launching the powerful Mark 14s. Additionally, she also featured a 3-inch deck gun for surface engagements, particularly against unarmed or lightly armored vessels, and 50 caliber machine guns for anti-aircraft defense. The submarine was built for long missions and could stay at sea for up to 75 days. It had advanced systems and efficient ballast tanks for quick buoyancy control. Not long after entering service, in early May, USS Squalus and her men, led by Lieutenant Oliver F. Naquin, began a series of test dives off Portsmouth, New Hampshire. After completing 18 successful missions, on the morning of May 23rd, Skipper Naquin, 4 officers, 52 enlisted men, and 3 civilians left Portsmouth, down the Piscataqua River toward the open Atlantic for a 19th test. However, this dive would be anything but routine. That morning, with Squalus near the Isle of Shoals after submerging, the crew positioned the submarine into a steep dive and then leveled off at 60 feet, beginning their test. Suddenly, a nervous sailor in the engine room yelled desperately over the battle phone to take her up. For reasons that have never been fully determined, the main air induction valve malfunctioned, causing seawater to flood the aft compartments rapidly. The crew scrambled to close it and pump air into the ballast tanks, briefly raising the submarine, but the pressure increased too quickly as they tried to seal the leaks. With the battery compartment flooding and now at risk of explosion, the crew had no choice but to shut down the batteries, plunging the submarine into darkness. And while 8 sailors managed to escape the operating compartment through watertight doors right before it flooded, tragically, 26 other trapped men were not so lucky. Within minutes, Squalus crashed into the ocean floor, nearly 250 feet below. With limited oxygen, Commander Naquin advised the 32 survivors to remain as calm as possible, and estimating they had about 48 hours of oxygen, they fired smoke rockets as distress signals and sent a marker buoy with a phone line to the surface, desperately hoping someone would find them before it was too late. Not long after, Squalus' sister ship, USS Sculpin, spotted a smoke bomb, but just as the captains were about to establish contact through the buoy phone, a swell snapped the cable, severing communication. With time slipping away, the survivors hammered Morse code on the hull, their only link to the surface. But soon, the cold drained their strength, and chlorine gas began to leak from the flooded battery compartment. As more and more ships rushed to the scene in the Atlantic Ocean waters, everyone knew these operations were highly dangerous. Before that year, no submarine recovery had succeeded beyond 20 feet, let alone the 240 feet where Squalus was stranded. With no time to lose, the Navy turned to Lieutenant Commander Charles Swede Mommsen, leader of the Experimental Diving Unit. Already famous for inventing the Mommsen lung, a life-saving device already available in ships like Squalus, Mommsen had a new tool, the McCann Rescue Chamber, a pear-shaped diving bell that, despite never being used in a real rescue, he and his team had no choice but to try. Thankfully, the only model of the bell available on the East Coast was aboard the rescue ship USS Falcon, docked in nearby Connecticut. The following day, with the world now anxiously listening to news bulletins and radio broadcasts about the delicate situation, USS Falcon, carrying the diving team led by Mommsen, arrived at the scene after bad weather delayed their journey. Now ready, the crew began their rescue operation as the first diver descended 240 feet to tap on Squalus's escape hatch, signaling hope to the trapped crew. By this time, sailors were falling ill from leaked gases, and desperation was mounting. Working under immense pressure, the divers took over 40 painstaking minutes to lower the cable and another 22 to secure the diving bell. After these tense moments, the bell reached Squalus, a watertight seal was made, and the sailors inside passed hot soup to the exhausted crew. Now, with a connection established, the skipper quickly identified the weakest sailors, and the first of 7 groups were loaded into the rescue chamber, reaching the surface after 2 p.m., more than 24 hours after the initial incident. Well aware of New England's unpredictable weather, the second trip carried 9 sailors instead of 7, followed by another 9 on the third trip. During the fourth and final ascent, carrying 8 men, including skipper Naquin, the bell suddenly became stuck at 160 feet due to a fouled cable. With no other choice, Mommsen had to cut the cable, allowing the bell and the terrified men to settle back on the seafloor before reattaching it and starting the ascent again. Finally, after nearly 5 hours, all 33 surviving sailors were rescued from the sunken Squalus in a resounding and historic success. For their work, enlisted divers William Batters, Orson L. Crandall, James H. McDonald, and John Mielowski subsequently received the Medal of Honor. Now there was the issue of what to do with the multi-million-dollar submarine at the bottom of the ocean. As a brand new submarine with many expensive, state-of-the-art design features, the United States Navy called Swede Mommsen back to the Isle of Shoals to salvage the sunken Squalus. Rear Admiral Cyrus W. Cole led the operation, with salvage officer Lieutenant Floyd A. Tussler overseeing it. The plan was to lift the submarine in 3 separate stages to prevent it from rising too quickly and sinking again. For 50 days, divers and other employees worked around the clock, passing cables under the submarine and attaching pontoons to create buoyancy. On July 13th, the crew successfully raised the stern, but upon attempting to free the bow from the dense blue clay, the submarine began to rise uncontrollably, breaking free from her cables. As Squalus shot upward, nearly 30 feet of her bow briefly broke the surface before she rapidly plunged back to the ocean floor. Mommsen recalled that, quote, pontoons were smashed, hoses cut, and, I might add, hearts were broken. After 20 additional days of intense preparation, the team attempted the next lift, with the pontoon and cable system completely redesigned. This time, it worked, and success followed with the 2 other lifts. Finally, on September 13th, after more than 600 total dive attempts and over 4 months at the bottom of the ocean, the now risen Squalus was finally towed into Portsmouth and decommissioned on November 15th to undergo a full overhaul. On May 15th, 1940, the submarine was recommissioned into the U.S. Navy with a new name, USS Sailfish. Despite this, the name Squalus persisted amongst the sailors, prompting the wartime commanding officer to issue strict orders banning any mention of the submarine's original name. From then on, however, the crew jokingly called the vessel Squalfish, despite the threat of being court-martialed. The new and improved USS Sailfish departed Portsmouth for the Pacific on January 16, 1941, arriving at Pearl Harbor in March. For months, she operated out of Manila as part of the Asiatic Fleet's submarines until the vicious attack on December 7th, when she set off for her first wartime patrol along the west coast of Luzon. On the night of December 13th, Sailfish encountered 2 Japanese destroyers and launched a submerged attack. When the enemy destroyers detected her, they dropped nearly 20 depth charges in response to her torpedoes. Despite a nearby explosion, no significant damage was inflicted, and Sailfish managed to escape, returning to Manila on December 17th to end her patrol. Throughout the war, her patrols ranged from uneventful to highly distinguished. During her second patrol under Richard G. Voge, on January 27, 1942, off Halmahera, she damaged a Miyoko-class cruiser with 4 torpedoes. After a refuel, she headed toward the Java Sea, intercepting an enemy destroyer on March 2nd and launching an unsuccessful attack before diving deep to avoid depth charges from the destroyer and patrol aircraft. That same night, the crew saw what they thought was the aircraft carrier Kaga, but it was actually the aircraft ferry Kamogawa Maru. They fired 4 torpedoes, scoring 2 hits and leaving their target ablaze. While the nearby escorts responded with 40 depth charges, Sailfish evaded all of them. Later that summer, Sailfish intercepted a Japanese freighter, launching 2 torpedoes. Hearing explosions as they dove, the crew resurfaced 90 minutes later to find the freighter gone. After shifting her base of operations to Brisbane, Australia, Sailfish, now under the command of John R. Dinty Moore, began her 6th patrol on September 13th, heading toward the heavily contested Solomon Islands. On the 19th, Sailfish fired 3 torpedoes at a Japanese mine layer, but missed the mark. The enraged enemy responded with a fierce barrage of depth charges, forcing the submarine to dive deep. 11 explosions rocked the submarine, but they only caused minor damage. Following her narrow escape, Sailfish returned to Brisbane. On November 24th, Sailfish set out on her 7th patrol, this time to the waters south of New Britain. After an attack on a destroyer on December 2nd yielded no results, Sailfish made no other contacts until Christmas Day, when her crew believed they had struck a Japanese submarine. Still, post-war analysis couldn't confirm the sinking. Following an overhaul at Mare Island from January to April, a repaired Sailfish departed Pearl Harbor for her 8th patrol. Refueled and ready, she reached her station off Honshu. On June 15th, she sank the freighter Shinju Maru with a stern torpedo, and only 10 days later, Sailfish encountered another convoy and sank the freighter Iburi Maru. In response, enemy forces launched a brutal 10-hour depth charge attack, but she escaped with minor damage. On July 25th, now led by William R. Lefevre, Sailfish began her 9th patrol in the Formosa Strait in Okinawa, returning to Pearl Harbor after an uneventful mission in September. After completing a refit at Pearl Harbor, Sailfish, now under the command of Robert E. McCraner Ward, set out on her 10th patrol on November 17th, heading south of Honshu once again. On their way, the crew faced a dangerous hot-run torpedo in Tube 8, where the engine ignited inside the tube, risking detonation. Captain Ward inspected the issue, ensuring it was safely ejected, but Tube 8 remained unusable for the rest of the patrol. After refueling at Midway, Sailfish received intelligence from Ultra about a nearby fast-moving convoy of Japanese ships, including the escort carrier Chuyo, a cruiser, and 2 destroyers. Just after midnight on December 4th, 1943, in the midst of high seas and typhoon winds, Sailfish prepared to engage the enemy, setting the stage for one of her most significant confrontations. Amid the storm, Sailfish relied solely on radar, picking up contact 9,000 yards southeast of Yokosuka. Radio radar operator Bill Dillon recalled the tense moment, quote, "We were flying blind. If you can picture this, it's midnight, and we saw nothing. All we got was blips. And we fired 4 torpedoes and hit 2. And it was absolutely unbelievable, because you've got to recall when we were doing that, the ship was still moving, and we had no idea what it was, and we still got it. Hard to believe you can do something like that. It's almost impossible." She targeted Chuyo, landing 2 devastating hits that left the carrier limping behind the rest of the convoy. Not willing to let the enemy escape, Skipper Ward pressed the attack, sending multiple torpedoes into the wounded vessel until she finally succumbed to the waves. The sinking of Chuyo marked a rare and significant victory, as only 4 Japanese escort carriers would be lost to American submarines throughout the Pacific War. However, in a sad twist of fate, inside the carrier were 21 survivors from her sister ship, USS Sculpin, which was sunk by the Japanese destroyer Yamagumo just weeks earlier. Tragically, only one of Sculpin's crew survived Chuyo's sinking, along with the Japanese survivors. On another patrol between Luzon and Formosa, Sailfish performed as not just a hunter, but a rescuer. On October 12, 1944, the crew received breaking news while operating alongside submarines Pomfret and Parchi. According to intelligence, 11 Navy aviators, after completing airstrikes against Japanese bases on Formosa as part of an operation to divert Japanese attention away from the planned Allied landing at Leyte Gulf, were forced to ditch their planes in the Philippine Sea, leaving them stranded. As Sailfish sailed to rescue the airmen, enemy vessels also approached to capture the downed aviators. With this, a tense firefight erupted on the high seas, with the American submarine using her deck gun to sink one enemy ship and damage another, successfully warding off the threat. Sailfish continued her rescue mission the following day, locating and recovering another surviving aviator. Now, with all survivors aboard, she made her way to Saipan, arriving on October 24th. Following minor repairs and refueling, the submarine damaged a Japanese destroyer and landing ship in the Luzon Strait, and after narrowly escaping depth charge attacks, she and her crew completed their 12th and final war patrol on December 11, 1944. After acting as a training ship, she was officially decommissioned in December 1945. From a submarine raised from the ocean floor to a celebrated warship, Sailfish earned a total of 9 battle stars and the Presidential Unit Citation, particularly for her role in sinking the Japanese aircraft carrier Chuyo.